Do you struggle with machine quilting feathers? Or do you feel like no matter how hard you try, they don't look quite right? Don't despair. In this video, I'm gonna share some very common feather frustrations and show you how to solve them. I'll also give you tips for practicing feathers and tell you how you can get some free quilting diagrams so that you can be successful with feathers as well. Hey, I'm Angela Walters from Quilting is My Therapy, and welcome to the Fabulous Feathers Free Motion Challenge. Over the next 7 videos, I'm gonna show you how to quilt some fabulous feathers. We're gonna learn how to quilt feathers in blocks, borders, backgrounds, and more. Quilt along with me on the exclusive panel I designed just for the challenge, and soon you'll be feathering quilts until they fly. Now, let's get you on the right path to quilting feathers. Before we can learn how to fix those common problems, let's see how the feather design goes together. I'm going to show you 2 easy feathers that I love to use. Most feather designs are made up of a spine and petals. It's just how you quilt them that makes them look different. First up is the basic feather. It doesn't have any stitching in the ditch and creates a beautiful, elegant look. I'm going to start by quilting a spine that has a little bit of wave to it, and at the top I'm going to quilt a petal. That's going to be the top of my feather, and then I'm going to start working my way down the side, adding more of those petals, and they're going to be kind of like half heart shapes. I want to quilt the petal so it starts out nice and round, and then quilt it so that the line merges back into the spine. And then once I reach the bottom of my spine, I'm going to echo my way back up to the top and do the same on the other side. And then when I'm done, I have that nice basic feather that has no traveling, but still adds a beautiful, elegant look. Now there's another kind of feather that I also like to quilt. I call it the custom feather. This one does incorporate a little bit more backtracking, but the result is so worth the effort. Now this feather, I actually start quilting from the bottom up. So I'm going to quilt my spine first and then start adding my petals. I'm going to quilt that spine so it's nice and curvy. And then once I get to the bottom, I'm going to start adding my petals. These petals are actually quilted in groups of 2. So I'm going to quilt my first one so that it goes out, and I'm going to travel back and then quilt my next one so that it comes back to the spine. And I want to make it look as though it's merging into that spine. Travel up along the spine a bit and then repeat, quilting my petals in groups of 2. Again, quilting out, traveling, and then coming back. Now once I make it to the top of my feather, I'm going to echo my way back down to the bottom and repeat on the other side. And when I'm done, I have a big, beautiful custom feather. Don't you love how I make quilting feathers look so easy? It's because I know how to avoid those common frustrations. Let's go over them now. Let's look at this feather example. Can you guess why it doesn't look quite right? I have taught a lot of classes, and probably the most common feather frustration is forgetting to quilt that line so that it looks like it's merging into the spine. I want to quilt the feather so that when I come around, it merges into that spine. I almost kind of think of it like an on-ramp, right? If I keep going, it will just turn into the spine. There's a couple of reasons this is so important. First of all, it's going to set me up and leave me room to add my next petal. By curving out and then back in, it's going to be pretty obvious where the next one goes. What I don't want to do is quilt that line so that it runs into the spine, kind of like right here. What'll happen is if I keep doing that, I might end up going the opposite direction and it just won't look quite as good. The second reason is purely aesthetic. I just think it looks better that way. With those lines merging into the spine, they kind of come down and it just gives it that nice, elegant look. The good news is this is an easy fix. So if I start quilting my petals, if I catch it in time, I can just travel on down the spine a little bit and start again, quilting that petal so that it comes out and merges into the spine. As you can see, quilting those lines so that they look like they're merging into the spine is not only going to make it look better, but it's also going to make it obvious where the next petal goes. And this is true whether you're doing the basic feather or the more custom feather with the traveling. I've quilted one side so that they merge into the spine and the other so that it runs into the side. Neither one of them are technically incorrect. I just think the other side looks better. Let's look at common issue number 2. Check out this feather. I'm quilting the lines so that they're merging into the spine, so why doesn't it look so great? One common feather frustration that I see newer quilters make is they make their petals too skinny. Machine quilted feathers look better when they're big and curvy. It's this unquilted area in the petals that really make it look pretty. But I know that when we're learning something new, it can be scary to really extend it out in that space. This is also an easy fix. If you can't quite seem to make them round enough, try marking out your feathers beforehand. You might find it makes it a little bit easier. Of course, you could quilt your petals so they're nice and round, quilt those lines so that they merge into the spine, but sometimes it still doesn't look right. For instance, check out this sample. It'll show you another common feather frustration. This is a pretty feather, but the thread buildup along the spine is detracting from the nice round petals. The good news is, it's also an easy fix. First, if you're struggling with making those petals land perfectly on the line, and you find that they're crossing over, that's when it causes that thread to build up and draw attention to the center. If that happens, I'd rather stop short than go over. Stopping short will prevent that thread from building up, and as long as you do it for most of the petals, it'll look intentional. And it looks just as good whether you do the basic feather or the more custom feather. Another way to help prevent that thread buildup from the center is to add an echo to your spine. That echo line is just going to help separate the sides, help prevent that thread from building up. This is one of the main reasons I always have echoed spines on my feathers. Now this next one isn't technically a frustration, it's just one little thing that I do that I think makes my feathers look better. Let's check out this feather. There's nothing wrong with it. It's quilted perfectly right. It has the round petals, it has those lines merging into the spine, but I don't like how rigid and stiff it is. When I'm quilting my feathers, I like to quilt the spine so that they have a little bit of curve to them. It's just gonna kind of help give it a little bit of movement and make it look nice. Now I'm not talking about a super wavy line, I just want a spine that has a little bit of a gentle curve. Now it can make quilting the feather a little bit more difficult since sometimes that spine is coming towards you and sometimes it's moving away. Just keep quilting your petals until you run into the spine. Sometimes it might take a little bit longer to get there, but the result is still going to be beautiful. Once you solve those common frustrations, I bet your feathers are going to look better than ever. And if you've been wanting to learn feathers, the good news is it just takes a little practice. There's a couple different ways that you can improve your feather quilting. First up, try a stencil. A stencil gives you a roadmap where to quilt so that you can learn how the design goes together without stressing out about what goes next. Simply find one you like, mark it on your fabric, and quilt along the lines. And even if it isn't perfect, once you remove the marking, all you're going to see is that beautiful design. This is how I finally learned how to quilt feathers. I had a stencil that I just marked over and over and over again, and finally it clicked. Then once you get comfortable with the design, you can start learning how to fit it in defined areas. Whether you're drawing or quilting, mark a defined space, quilt a spine down the center of it, and then practice quilting your feathers to fill it in. And be sure to keep at it, because the more you practice, the better you're going to get. Now, if you're still struggling with quilting feathers, be sure to check out this free downloadable PDF with quilting diagrams and tip sheets. It'll show you how to quilt the feather, as well as list out some of those common frustrations that you might come across. Now go ahead and practice the designs, whether you try drawing them out or quilting on a scrap piece of fabric, because next week we're going to learn how to quilt these feather designs in blocks using our gorgeous Fabulous Feathers panel. Until then, happy quilting!